Because this week's all about love. That's what we're going to talk about. Hey everybody, Jeff Ruprecht, Pine Tar Clothing. This is the Pine Tar Podcast. This is episode 2. Welcome. My name is Jeff Ruprecht, founder and designer at Pine Tar Clothing Company, where we're celebrating the hustle and heart of baseball. This week being that it's the week of love, for those that don't understand that, Valentine's Day is Saturday, 14th, 2026. So hopefully if you have love in your life, you celebrate that. It's important, very, very important nowadays to celebrate love. With that said, I want to talk about this week, love in the game of baseball. Here at Pine Tar Clothing Company, we believe in playing the game with grit and with love. So hence the love part of this week. And really it boils down to hustle and heart, which I also kind of interchange all those words out together because they do kind of go together. But when it comes to truly loving the game, like what does that mean? I'm sure it's different for everybody. Real quick, we even put it on a shirt with grit, with love. It's one of those core things. I think most ball players and fans of the game, whether they know it or not, there's probably something about the game that they love. Sometimes it's hard when you really sit down and think about it, about what are those things, right? So today I was just going to share some of mine. I could probably talk about this topic for a long time, but maybe a couple that I'm thinking about. And then I'd love to hear from you guys too. If you've got things that you love about the game, or whether that's as a ball player or as a fan or whatever that is, I would love to hear about it because I'm sure it's going to be different for everybody. But first off, for me, what's not to love, right? It is an amazing game. It's a game that's it's lasted for 150 years, right? Where it's been around so long. It's carried us through world wars. It has carried us through so many other parts of the history of America that it's always been there, right? And so it's just like, what's not to love? There's that, of course, but there's many other things. For me, I've always thought that as a ball player, there should be some evidence of love there, in how you play. Again, I think that's where that fits into the whole getting dirty, the hustle and heart part of it. But when you think about it as a player, it's sometimes hard to love the game, right? Of course, if you love it, you're there doing it. But my point being is, the game is not easy at all, as a ball player. Of course, when you're a kid and you're in your T-ball into your whatever day is, it's a lot more accessible for a lot of kids. It's just like soccer. I guess you could say for a lot of the sports, I guess. I mean, you kind of start them off with certain things. As you get older, things get as you get bigger, stronger, faster, things start to slow down, or get faster. But then when you get to a point and you start to master the game a little bit more, they kind of tend to slow down, and then people start kind of falling off. They lose interest with it. Maybe they're not as, I don't want to say good. I think everyone has their place in the game, but there does come a reckoning where you kind of know if you're cut out to play it or not a little bit longer. But when you get up to more competitiveness, more competitive stuff, it's not easy, to ground a hard line ground ball, get up and throw a guy out, or know what to do next with it. It's such a mental play that people don't, sometimes think about when they're watching it, is just what's going through their heads as players. The pitcher, to be able to not only think, because it is always such kind of a dance, right? It's a dance between between you and your catcher, and then the batter, right? Of, what are you going to throw them next? How are you going to get them out? And, it is a mental play. It's kind of a playing chess kind of thing sometimes about what to throw next. What's the weakness, and then be able to execute that, to throw a strike when you need to throw a strike, as a batter, kind of knowing when, you got to know your zone. You got to know, so much about what to do next, if, depending where you're in the count, how your bat's going, like there's so much going through your own head. There's just a lot, right? There's just a lot to process. And it's funny because there's a lot of people that maybe don't care for baseball. They say it's too slow, and they're right. I think there is definitely a pace to the game that sometimes, isn't always like constant engagement, constant excitement. But trust me, there's a lot going on that if you really sit down and think about it, especially if you know the game well, then you definitely appreciate it more. And you kind of see like what some of the decisions that are made, about where to play guys. And again, as a pitcher, knowing about what, some guys that might be fastball hitters, how do you pitch around these guys? How are you going to get them out? How are you going to, and depending on how the situational piece is, you might not have a choice. Maybe you might have to intentionally walk a guy, because you just don't want to give up that next run because this guy is just too good. He's a pull hitter, or he's the opposite field guy, or whatever. There's just so much there with that. And then the other thing too, as a player, is it's such a weird game in that to fail 7 times out of 10, you're considered a good hitter. So for every 10 bats, you average 3 hits. Batting 300 is like, that's kind of our gauge, and it's like, wow, they're a good hitter. And they fail more than they succeed, right? It's such a crazy thing sometimes. So anyways, but get there too, like it's such a unique thing that is, you can't help but love that. Yeah. And when you think about too, like when you think about that too, that there is a lot of times excitement too, though, when you get to later parts of a game and you might have to manufacture a run, where, your outs are getting down there and maybe you're not having great success at the plate, but, a guy gets on, he gets walked, and you're trying to get them into scoring position so you can maybe get that tying run home, or then you go ahead, or, and to be able to, use small ball to get that run across is amazing. On the opposite end, obviously there too, if you hit a home runs are always fun, right? No matter when, especially late in the game, especially when you get down 8th, 9th inning or a walk-off, like a walk-off homer, or even just a walk-off single or double or whatever, a walk-off hit that scores that run that, in the 9th inning or even in extra innings. That's pretty exciting stuff, and then especially when the games matter even more, when it's playoff time, that's when you see a lot of people, the legends are made, if you will. Right. And, so that's just, there's so much to love with that. And then like the history of the game too. Love it. Like, some people play the game, they might know the basics of it. Right. I tend to, I like it a lot. I'm not a baseball historian at all. I mean, I know enough to be dangerous. And I'd like to share more of that with you guys in future dates, but the game, like I started off the show talking about, just the everlasting thrill of it, the everlasting engagement that it's had on especially our country. It's nothing to be denied, right? There's been so many greats, different eras of the game that, there too, it's hard not to love, especially if you grew up cheering for certain teams or cheering for certain players. It's an amazing thing, and to be able to be alive and to cheer for certain players that, well, maybe they're in the Hall of Fame, or you got to see them either in person or at least not watch them on TV. And you got to experience and witness some of the greats. you know, like I would have been loved to have been around to see like, you know, turn of the century, you know, of course, Babe Ruth is an immortal icon in all sports, almost almost like a god level in a way, you know, but he was loved. He was loved by a lot of people. You know, he was, and granted, the guy hit a lot of home runs. He made the game fun. You know, you know, his personal life was kind of over the place, but, you know, on the field, like this guy he was something. He was the great Bambino. You know, we've had movies, you know, Sandlot is arguably one of the best baseball movies out there. I think my kids, probably wore out the DVD growing up of the Sandlot like 4 times. Like I've got like 5 copies of it and they're all scratched up because the kids would just beat the crap out of it. Right. But again, you know, the legend of the great Bambino is even stretched into, you know, somewhat modern time, folklore, you know. Then you get to the middle part of the 1900s, you know, like the Mickey Mantles, you know, the Willie Mays, obviously Jackie Robinson did such a great thing, you know, breaking the color barrier and making the game accessible to everyone, which way it should be, you know, like, of course you see and you read up about all those things, but to be alive and to be a witness some of that is kind of crazy to fathom, like, you know, that some people got to do that. That's pretty crazy. For me, you know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so some of my favorites, guys I love, Nolan Ryan. Can't even tell you, like, I always loved that guy. I love watching him pitch. He was such a bulldog, you know, he threw hard. His curveball, which he crafted over the years, was arguably one of the best. You know, guy threw 7 no-hitters. I mean, that's just crazy. You know, he owns like, I think every record, like, well, obviously 7 no-hitters. I think the most 1-hitters, the most 2-hitters. The guy just, he didn't, he over 5,000 strikeouts. That'll probably never be broken. I almost guarantee it. You heard it here first, folks. You know, some of those, when you think about the history and just some of those records and those ball players and the records that they set that will probably never be broken. Cy Young, you know, at the early part of the 1900s, which, you know, the Cy Young Award is named after. A guy had 511 wins. You know, I doubt you'll ever see a pitcher do that, right? I mean, most Hall of Fame pitchers since him, if you crack 300 wins as a pitcher, you know, you're pretty much destined for the Hall. You know, he had 511. You know, that's just crazy. You know, Pete Rose, you know, with breaking Ty Cobb's record of hits, was it 4,192? You know, I doubt you'll ever see another player do that. The game has just changed so much, you know, that it might be hard for someone to do that. That doesn't mean it won't happen, but it'd be really hard. I think in today's game, it'd be really hard to see a guy that will do that, you know, or even like Cal Ripken with his consecutive games played streak. You know, it's like 2,000. That's what they call him the Iron Horse or Iron Man. I don't remember. It doesn't matter. Iron Horse, I believe. The guy played in like over 21. I want to say it was 2152. I'm just guessing. I didn't look it up, but it was a lot. I mean, but you think about it, especially in today's game again, to play that many consecutive games, you know, with injuries being so prevalent, throwing injuries and you name it, right? To play that many games in a row without ever not playing, like, it's crazy to think about. It doesn't sound like that a lot, but you know, they have 162 games a year. I mean, that's like 20 straight years of not missing a lineup. How does that happen? It just doesn't happen, right? So just the history of the game is amazing, you know, and that's what also makes it so much to love is that. God, what else? Ballparks, right? And I mean at every level. Like I like even going to my local ball field. You know, there's some like older ball fields around here that I just love to go to. You can tell they're old, like by their, like there's one out in Cloquet, Minnesota. I actually really like that ball field. It's been there a long time, but they have like the coolest like light towers for their lights so they could play at night. They're like, I don't know, they look like the erector sets, you know. They all are crisscross, like they're just cool looking, and you can tell like they're probably definitely mid-century, and they've been there for quite a while, and super cool. I've been to a couple college ballparks. They're pretty cool. Of course, the major leagues, obviously there's some amazing ones. Fortunately, I haven't been to a lot of them. I've been to a few. Probably count them probably on both hands. Target Field I've been to the most because obviously I'm in Minnesota, so I've went down to the Twins and stuff and watched their stuff there, and it's a great ballpark. So it definitely beats the Metrodome, although the Metrodome had its own kind of odd memories and things to love about it. But that thing, was that thing, but the baggies that they had for the outfield fences and stuff were terrible. Target Field is such a huge upgrade for them. But I've also been like Busch, both Old Busch and New Busch in St. Louis. St. Louis is such a great town for baseball. They love baseball there. You talk about love and baseball. St. Louis loves it. I haven't been inside, but I have walked around and peeked in Pittsburgh at PNC. That's a beautiful ballpark. Seattle, their ballpark's nothing to sneeze at. I like that ballpark. Where else have I been? A couple in Florida for spring training, which definitely smaller, but they're cool. Like I've been to the Red Sox. Oh, I've been to Fenway. Fenway was amazing. I want to go back there again. That was I can't believe we forgot about Fenway. Love that ballpark. But then you think about being at the ballpark, right? And I know for me, like, gotta get a hot dog, gotta get a beer, there's some like gatas when you go to a game outside, that it just makes it, I don't know, there's something about it, right? You just get flooded with memories and things, right? In fact, I was going to read you something really quick. A. Bartlett Giamatti, he was a former, like in the late 80s, he was the commissioner of baseball. But he has a famous poem, and I'm going to read it to you because it kind of talks about this a little bit. But he said, baseball breaks your heart. It is designed to break your heart. The game begins in the spring when everything else begins again, and it blossoms in the summer, filling the afternoons and evenings. And then as soon as the chill rains come, it stops and leaves you to face the fall alone. You count on it, rely on it to buffer the passage of time, to keep the memory of sunshine and high skies alive. And then just when the days are all twilight, when you need it most, it stops. It's totally true, right? It's like right now, I can't wait for the spring here, especially this year. We have the World Baseball Classic getting started, which has been kind of fun to watch. And of course, the new MLB season. I know a lot of the local teams are all getting fired up, ready to go at the college and high school levels here. I don't know, here in Minnesota, it's usually March into April when they play into June in the high school ranks. Same with a lot of colleges, because it's just weather, right? But when you read something like this, it's totally true for a lot of people, but especially here in Minnesota, because they're right? It starts to get cold and stuff, it goes away, and then it comes back in the spring, and it's just like, it's totally like a renewing, starting over. It's spring, right? And then the summer, it just kind of, again, you get the most beautiful weather in the summer, enjoying a ball game on a nice, calm, warm night. Man, nothing like that, right? But anyways, loving the game is a huge part. And especially this week, thinking about it, getting ready for the new season, thinking about loving the game is definitely on my radar. So anyways, I'd love to hear more about what you love about the game. I just gave you a handful of ideas of things that I think about, things that I've cared for over the years. And so if you think of it, drop something in any of the platforms, comment or whatever, just things that you love. I'll probably ask that in those social things too. But thanks again for listening to the second ever Pine Tar podcast. This one was about love. Next week, I'm not sure yet, but I'll surprise you. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.